sleepy university town that gave us the Maastricht Treaty comes an even more radical idea. Professor Luc Suter proposes that the only way to turn the tide is for the European Union to start taxing the digital economy itself.
We cannot continue the way we are at this moment earning our revenues in terms of our overall taxing system. It's obvious as our world is globalizing and as we are now confronted with a global information production system and a global information consumption system, we're no longer undermining the national production taxes we are putting in our economies, which are becoming undermined by global production, but also the global consumption, the global way we can consume is undermining our national consumption taxes. And we should therefore move into other directions and find new taxing systems.
Suter is not just any Euro economist. He chairs the European Union's advisory panel on the information society. His proposal is for a flat-rate tax on every piece of electronic data flowing across European computer networks. He calls it the bit tax.
When you start with new tax proposals, certainly in these days, you must start with something which is extremely transparent, very simple and neutral. So the idea is simply to start with a bit tax, that is that you say you charge a very small amount. I'm talking about a cent of a dollar was the idea for every megabit, for every 1 million bits of data.
In the last decade, European citizens have given even a hint of tax increases a hostile reception. Now they may be asked to accept a completely new type of tax, but desperate times call for desperate measures.
What's happening is, at the same time as the government is unable to raise revenue because of globalization, because of electronic products bypassing VAT, at the same time as that is happening, the call on the money is becoming greater because of the social security safety net. It can't happen. The books don't add up.
The shift to trading across the internet will only make things worse as collecting VAT becomes impossible. Every pound of tax lost is another reason for governments to look favourably on the bit tax.
Well, if you look back at the way that goods were traded in the past, you'd buy goods from a shop. It was very visible what you were buying, how much you were spending on it. It was also visible how the goods got into the shop. As we move to shipping, in effect, invisible, intangible goods, services, software, music, video and so forth over the internet, it becomes increasingly invisible. Luc Suter, for instance, showed figures suggesting, I think it was $3 billion of leaked tax revenue in the States through mail order business done over the internet. If those are the sort of figures that we're actually seeing of lost sales tax or value-added tax at this early stage of internet trading, then that points to huge losses of tax revenue later on, hence a requirement to move away from value add, which is associated with tangibles, to the proposed idea for bit tax, which would be based on purely intangible packets of information.
The bit tax is not a tax on information. It taxes the amount of data, not its value. The first to feel the effects will be global businesses who transport masses of data across their networks. Companies like London-based engineers Ove Arup, responsible for some of the world's most prestigious buildings, like the new Commerzbank headquarters in Frankfurt.
On the Commerzbank, just on that one project, we sent about 1 gigabyte of information in drawn form from here to Germany and back again and backwards. It's around about that quantity of information. Now that's represented by about 200 drawings. Those are reduced down from their full size by a factor of 4. So that represents 1 gigabyte of information, and that would be typical for a large project.
Arups rely on their computer network to share information with suppliers and clients, as well as their 64 offices worldwide. Communication is vital to their global business, so they've studied the proposals for a bit tax with interest and growing concern.
Yeah, that's the point, Oz. We'll have to...
Calculating it over a period of a year, we've estimated that we send about 90 million megabytes of data. If we round that up to 100 million megabytes, that's, to us, based on a 1 pence per megabyte, £1 million extra that we're likely to pay. Somebody would have to dictate what data goes through. My personal view is that if a tax was levied on communications, people would resort to other means to be able to transfer information.
But though the numbers may sound large, Luke Souter believes that in relation to Arup's turnover of £180 million, the actual cost is small.
We made a little calculation for a company like Hewlett Packard on their intranet, their internal net system. I think they used about 5 terabytes a month, etc. Anyway, we calculated that the total amount would be about 1 per thousandth of their total profits would be the additional bit tax they would have to pay per thousandth of total world profits of Hewlett Packard.
However small the bill in the global economy, companies have become very clever at avoiding taxes.
Corporations don't pay taxes. They may on the surface, but they then, because they employ people, they will go to government and say, please give us a grant or we will move. If they don't like the tax policy, they will up and go.
The passenger terminal at Hong Kong's new airport at Chek Lap Kok dominates the landscape.
For a global company like Arup's, local taxes and employment costs influence where work gets done. At the moment, many projects on the Pacific Rim are designed in Britain. How long could this continue if the bit tax applied in Europe, but not in the rest of the world?
To ensure that it meets its April 1998.
We would be horrified, frankly. I mean, it would be putting an enormous potential cost on top of the design element and the end cost to the client, frankly. We want the consultants in the UK to be doing this work in Europe or around the world. If there's a bit tax, then they're less likely to be employed to do that if it is putting an on-cost onto the costs to our clients.
Well, if a bit tax were introduced, say, just in Europe, I guess it would make us think, well, perhaps we shouldn't be working in Europe at all. We should be doing work in one of our other offices worldwide, which may be a client requirement anyway. But it would be a pity if a bit tax would put us at a competitive disadvantage, because we are in a very international market. If we were taxed here, and yet we realised we wouldn't be taxed, say, working out of Singapore or somewhere like that, then it would be an encouragement for us to go abroad faster.
I would be very doubtful if a company who has its competitive advantage in Europe would be considering to delocalize because it would receive a marginal additional tax. The purpose is not just to increase taxes and to increase the cost on corporate business. The purpose is to raise additional revenues which are in line with the emerging information society and to put it back in the economy on those production factors which are now at this moment being overtaxed and reducing our competitiveness. I've put forward the idea that, for instance, in this country, the Netherlands, or in Belgium, or in Germany, or in France, these monies would be spent to reduce the social security payments which employers have to make.
Souter has calculated a 1 cent per megabit tax could raise enough money to abolish all Belgium's national insurance contributions. The European Commission looks set to give the green light to pilot studies of the bit tax for industries like telecoms. So how would it be collected?
I think the only real way that I personally could see it working is levying a tax by the internet service providers, where you say that the backbone service providers pay such and such a rate for the bits that flow along their pipes. And then as the subsidiary internet service providers take more and more of that capacity, they then have to pay some of the amount back up the chain until ultimately the end users are charged for the bits that come along their modems from the internet service providers. That's not to say I think that's the way it will work, or that I approve of the way that it might work. That's the only way that I could see it possibly working.
I don't see how it can work. It's become highly complex because it's not just information, computerized information. We're in the age of multimedia. So what comes in will be television, pictures, will be sound, not just data that is perceived to be of commercial value. In fact, the volume of data that is of commercial value will be infinitesimal compared to, say, the size of a TV film. It's a frantic ploy by governments who see their whole world disappearing. Their ability to steal off the middle classes is over. And they're frantically now trying to hold on to their power. And it's a futile gesture on their part.
For Luke Souter, the situation is simple. Taxes must move with the digital times.
So the tax base of a country must move hand in hand with where value is being generated. And my claim is that a lot of value is being generated at the moment in information and communication, and that it evaporates in society. I think the big issue, the big challenge for economists is to come up with new ideas about raising taxes which do have positive impacts on your economy.
The computer industry likes to present itself as the most powerful in the world, a constant battle between innovative titans. Once a year, everyone who's anyone converges on Las Vegas. But is it to hear inspiring speeches and launch fantastic new products, or just to drink free beer and party? Rupert Goodwin's offered to show the net his personal experience of the excess that is Comdex.
It's been 25 years since Hunter S. Thompson wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and it's been 25 years since the invention of the microprocessor. These two events don't have much in common, apart from a happy birthday, and, oh yes, Comdex. Comdex is a huge computer show in Las Vegas. It's Comdex short for Computer Distributors Exposition. And it started in the early 80s just as a way for people who sell computers to get together and discuss how to sell more. And since then, the entire computing industry, including those who make them and those who program them, have got in on the act. And now it's some 200,000 people spread across 5 or 6 different sites. People think of computers as being logical, cold things that always make sense, and Vegas makes no sense. It's a complete fantasy town. And the mixture of the two is really very bizarre indeed. If you go down to Caesar's Palace and walk along the Appian Way and the row of shops, which is a microcosm, the roof is painted like the sky and the lights change to reflect a day in about half an hour, and you lose all sense of reality, and your senses are bombarded with all these images, and Comdex reflects that. It has to. There's no point in being here and being understated, because you just vanish. So all the stands get painted very brightly, the lights are very bright and they're very noisy, and all the people from the CEO down to the smallest sales assistant dress in the same sort of garish company t-shirts with the company logo and some sort of horrific slogan painted across the back. And they're all bouncy and happy and very pleased to see you. It's slightly distressing after a while, but you've got to be like that to have any chance of surviving in a town that's quite as insane as Vegas. Comdex crystallises the way the industry actually is. So Microsoft has a huge stand with hundreds of companies under its wing who have bought into the empire and accepted the protection of Emperor Gates in return for paying their dues into supporting the company and smiling when the cameras look at them. The Federal Trade Commission have agreed to reopen the investigation into whether Microsoft has a monopoly position in the software industry for the third time. And if they're here today, they might in fact wonder whether to incorporate the company as the 51st state of America.
It's fun to see every year how elaborate Comdex has become. It's fantastic how people try to draw attention to their booths and do the most amazing...
Well, we've come all the way out to the Aladdin Casino to hear Bill Gates tell us what a wonderful thing Microsoft is. But due to roadworks, we're 5 minutes late, and the auditorium is full, the listening room is full, and the overflow room is full. And we've been told to go back to the hotel room and listen to it broadcast on the internet. We might as well just go home and listen to it on the internet. I can't really see the point. And other companies would like to be as big as Microsoft. They have big stands which are strangely quiet. Welcome to the comparative sanity of the Apple stand. This is Apple's biggest stand ever at Comdex, which is not unconnected to the fact that they're having some of their toughest times. They really need to say, hey, look at us, we're still really important. The internet's everywhere, and Comdex is almost more an internet show now than it is a computer show. Everybody's on the internet, every stand, every company has an internet aspect. Core software is still Microsoft, it looks like it always will be. We're just waiting to see which of the internet companies survives and prospers, and which ones fall by the wayside. The parties. This, of course, is the real reason people go to Comdex. Most of them are sponsored by a company, so you end up not paying for your food and your drink, which is nice. Oh, great, popcorn. Oh, nice is complete. And this is the Eurosrobotics Monday Night Football party, just Eurosrobotics and a few of their close personal friends, about 2,000 or 3,000 of US computer nerds and their wives, and of course some of those wives are nerds too. Just drinking beer, eating hamburgers and watching the football. Vegas hosts a number of conventions, but Comdex has a special place in the town's heart. It really doesn't like it very much, because computer people aren't like other people. When you have 200,000 of them in a place, they don't gamble. Computer people just don't put money into machines or spend time on the tables. Nobody's quite sure why, and given their happiness for gambling with the company's money, but in this case it doesn't work. There's no word to describe the queues, you just have to put up with them. If you want to go into a restaurant or you want to get a taxi, you just have to stand in line, as Americans call it, for half an hour. So you stand there next to some huge bloke from Alabama and the Taiwanese talking animatedly about some database package, and you shuffle forward slowly and you watch the sun go down, which does very quickly. Towards the end it all gets a bit much and people do suffer from burnout.
It's impossible to say how much pornography is on the internet, but there's no question it's there. And as the net has grown, media pressure to clean it up has intensified. Fueled by fears about child pornography and paedophiles, this culminated last autumn in The Observer accusing internet service providers of being peddlers of child abuse. Media pressure is one thing, but the newspapers revealed that the police were poised to intervene for the first time. Warnings from the Metropolitan Police Vice Unit to internet service providers that they may have been breaking the law by carrying illegal pornographic material on their services encouraged them to take action.
We pointed out to them that certain things that they were doing, in our opinion, contravened the Obscene Publications Act, and particularly in relation to news groups. And I dare say that a lot of them had never thought of things in those terms before, because the internet is new. They hadn't thought perhaps about their responsibilities under that particular legislation. But we saw it fairly clearly that they did actually possess obscene articles for gain in our interpretation of the legislation. It wasn't a threat, but we did say to them that there were three ways of dealing with the problem, if you like. One was sit on your hands and do nothing because it's all too difficult. We didn't think that was acceptable. The next one was for us to go steaming in and start arresting people or executing warrants, and we didn't want to do that either. But the third one was self-regulation by the industry.
Peter Dorr is a founding father of the UK internet industry and a multi-millionaire. He started Pipex, the UK's largest internet access provider, and sold it for £32 million. Frustrated by the industry's failure to respond, he decided to use both his influence and his money to fund a charity that would take responsibility for cleaning up the net.
I think the main thing that was happening was that the government was saying, we don't want to legislate, we don't want to tell the police to do anything. The police were saying, we don't want to make laws and do things, we'll just enforce what's there. And then the industry didn't want to take responsibility, sort of volunteer to make themselves culpable. So someone had to do something and no one wanted to do it.
The Home Office and DTI have backed Dorr's charity, now called Internet Watch. Realising it's impossible to monitor the whole internet, Internet Watch has launched a hotline, asking the rest of us to report the location of any illegal pornography we see online.
We do need good information from people as to where to find what they're talking about. Very specific pages on the web or articles on a Usenet group. If we can't find it, we can't deal with it. But when we get that particular image up and have a look at it, we then use the information we've got from the police and from others to make our judgment as to whether it is potentially illegal. If that's the case, then we go on to our next stage, which is to find out who the responsible internet service provider is. If they're in this country, we then notify them that we've seen something or had something reported that we think is potentially illegal and ask them to remove it.
Without cooperation from the majority of the UK's internet service providers, Internet Watch will be wasting its time. Only internet service providers who control access to the net to UK users from data centres like this can remove illegal material. But getting them to agree on what should be done hasn't been easy. So does Internet Watch have their wholehearted support?
We're very much trying to make this a self-regulating industry. We're hoping that the industry will continue as it always has been, as a place where people get together and run the internet for the benefit of those people using the internet. And this has filtered right the way through into the Internet Watch, into the way that we're working with Internet Watch.
Demon Internet was the service provider targeted in the Observer article. It has a manager on duty 24 hours a day, responsible for receiving reports from Internet Watch and for removing illegal pornography within hours of being notified. However, only 2 instances of illegal material were reported to Demon during the whole of last year.
We're expecting a level of hoax calls, we're expecting a level of misunderstanding as to what is legal and what is illegal, and we're hoping that Internet Watch will be able to find the resource to actually filter this through so that we get only genuine reports. There is pornography on the net, there's pornography in the cinema, there's pornography in newsagents, there's pornography everywhere. What we've got to do is draw a clear distinction between legal pornography, girly magazine type stuff, Playboy, and illegal pornography, which is actually hurting children.
Some people are opposed to all pornography, but sex sells, and has undoubtedly sold the net to some users, especially with the appearance of sites from well-known top-shelf magazines. Distinguishing these soft porn sites from material that's illegal is a major challenge. The problem lies in the 2 laws governing pornography in the UK. The Child Protection Act makes any material featuring children potentially illegal. But the Obscene Publications Act, with its subjective assessment of what is liable to deprave and corrupt, has led to criticism of the police, both in the real world and now on the net.
The definition of obscenity has caused us problems for a long time. We have all sorts of problems in court. We've been pressing for a review of the legislation for some time now, and we're still hopeful that one will come about. It causes us problems on the net, also with videos and magazines as well, so it's not exclusive to this area.
Under Internet Watch's proposals, it's not the police who make the first judgment over whether material is illegal, but the charity itself. Will it be able to make these hard decisions?
That's one of the things that's taken us some time to work out, to talk to the relevant people, the police, and look at precedents and the courts, to make as good a judgment as we can as to what might lead to a successful prosecution in this country. Because nothing's illegal under most of the legislation we're dealing with till it's been to court and found to be illegal. So all we can say is this is potentially illegal. If it went to court, it might produce a prosecution.
In the 7 weeks since Internet Watch's launch, its hotline has been cool. Does that mean it's working or not?
You can see what was happening in the papers before Internet Watch started, in that there was a lot of newspaper articles generating a sense that something has to be done. Since Internet Watch, that has died down, and what we're hoping is that we can actually go that path that actually keeps the more illiberal people satisfied and out of our hair, and also keep the liberty of the internet and the freedom of speech of the internet available to all as well.
More than the removal of the illegal material, what people really want is the rating of all material, so that the girly magazines are kept away from children, so that people don't accidentally fall across porn sites when they're actually looking for something totally different.
Websites like Playboy already carry a US rating system, which stops access to them by people using special web browsers. Demon is working with Internet Watch on a similar rating system for the UK. This will help stop users stumbling on material they don't want to see. However, The nature of the internet suggests those who are determined to upload and view pornography will be able to get around any systems employed to stop them.
In any area of policing or regulation, there'll always be people who find a way around what you do. You have to live with that.
Information is power, or so we're told. Imminent announcements on security from MasterCard and Visa may at last usher in the age of personal online banking. So we asked financial journalist Alison Mitchell to see if the internet is really about to transfer the power of the banks into our homes.
Well, as a financial journalist, I find it very useful indeed. In the past, I used to keep a whole piles of press releases and piles of cuttings because they might just be useful, just in case I ever need it. Now, of course, I don't have to have any of that because there's a lot of good websites. You can go into the Times, the FT, the Standard, whatever, look up their cuttings, and that's a help. It's also very beneficial, of course, to people buying and selling shares. One of the ones I quite like is this one. It's the ESI, the Electronic Share Information, because immediately you go on, it tells you what the FTSE index is doing. This is the top 100 shares. Now, this is very handy for anyone that's got their own portfolio. It's very simple to go onto. Red ones have gone down, blue ones have gone up. It's a nice, easy screen. And if you've chosen something you want to buy or sell, you can actually buy or sell by going through this. You don't even need to pick up your phone and ring your stockbroker or anything. In the old days, you see, people used to have a relationship with their bank manager or with their stockbroker, and if you didn't, you might have thought, I don't think I'll buy shares, I'm not that sort of person, I don't know a stockbroker, I wouldn't know where to start. There's none of that anymore. So you can get your prices, you can read out what the people are writing about it, and then you just go ahead and buy. So I think more and more people will want to do that simply because they can do it from their own front room. A lot of people are a bit worried about the security. They worry about transferring their funds simply through the internet because they feel they can't feel it or touch it. But it must be coming in the future. It's a very cheap way for the banks to operate because they're not having to set up branches in the high street, which is a very expensive way of doing business. They're very switched on to the internet. When I started with NatWest, and what they've done is virtually put a lot of their brochures onto the website, so you can go there and check. For example, if you wanted a mortgage, you can find out what the interest rates are, you can find out what's on offer from the various accounts, regardless of which one you want. You can look to see their share dealing service, that sort of thing. The next one I went to was Barclays, and they've done theirs slightly differently, and I thought it was a much more difficult site to find my way around. They've located their bank in a traditional shopping centre, and I think this is the way that actually quite a lot of financial institutions are going, simply because they think that it will attract people in. If they just have one website, they might get people to come, but they might not get them to come back again. Whereas I think they feel that if they have a Berkeley Square or a Buckingham Gate, or they're setting up their own shopping mall, it's a bit like walking down the high street and going to the bank and then doing your shopping. Lloyds have chosen students as their customers. They have a campus with the overdraft arms in it, and they give students a lot of information about how to find accommodation and what to look out for, lots of hints and tips. Quite a jolly site actually, but you wouldn't go onto it if you weren't a student. Now, this is the Abbey National website, which I think is quite a good one because it's very well laid out. And if you go into the What's New, you can actually compare what your account with Abbey National would cost as compared to any of the other banks. This is the sort of thing it's very difficult to get yourself just by ringing around other banks. So it's ideal to be able to click onto the internet to get this. There are, of course, banks which exist simply on the internet that are properly regulated. In America, there's Security First National Bank. Very interesting site to go into, actually, because although it is a virtual reality bank, it doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't have branches. When you go into its website, it's laid out as the most traditional bank you could possibly have. They've even got flowers on the counter in one of them. I think, though, that the banks and the computer companies are realising that they both need each other, that neither the one can do it without the other. Barclays are already linking up with Microsoft, and you've got the TSB and CompuServe to provide the customers with a very good financial package which they can use through their screens. But of course the banks can't do it without the computer companies, and the computer companies are very keen to get in on this act. As soon as we're there and using the websites as they want it, I think there will be enormous resources pumped into it so that they give people exactly what they want.
Ask yourself this: what's the one thing that all great works of science fiction have in common? They all tried to see into the future, and they all got it wrong. Orwell's 1984, Huxley's Brave New World, Arthur C. Clarke's 2001, all to some extent or other wrong. And there's another name to add to this list: William Gibson. Gibson actually admits that his vision of cyberspace, the concept he himself invented, will never be realised exactly as he imagined it. So if they got the future wrong, what makes them so great? Well, the answer, of course, is they weren't really writing about the future. They were writing about the present. Idoru, Gibson's latest work, is a case in point. Set in Tokyo sometime in the next millennium, the story concerns a pop star who's entirely virtual, shaped not in wax or even plastic surgery, but in pure information. Through this story, Gibson explores very real and very current issues about the nature of power, the power of the media, the power of celebrity, the power of technology.
I only have to partake of homeopathic doses of celebrity compared to what a rock star or a film star would have to deal with. But even that little bit of it, I think, was useful in writing this book. The digitalization of media will change the nature of celebrity in the future. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to exactly how that would happen. I think the most important difference with the internet and the World Wide Web is that they're not top-down hierarchical structures on the order of broadcast television. So we're dealing with entirely new media here. So it's anyone's guess how it will go.
You make it almost sound like it's something that has no particular centre of control, so in a sense is sort of out of control.
Well, I think it is out of control. The out of control metaphor is increasingly popular in sort of haute computer circles in the United States. They say that's out of control is the way to go if you want artificial intelligence. Out of control is the way to go if you want technologies that evolve more quickly. You just sort of wind them up, let them loose, and see what they do. There is some potential, there is some basis for believing that a really talented and determined 15-year-old can create a website in his bedroom that's a more entertaining environment than something a multinational entertainment conglomerate might come up with. And in fact, that happens rather consistently. The good ones tend to be put together by kids, and the ones put together by major corporations are rather dull and behind the curve. At the same time, it doesn't matter how fast your modem is if you're being shelled by ethnic separatists. I mean, there's a limit. There's a limit to what this sort of technology can do for you personally.
And it depends where you are, in a sense.
It depends where you are. Although there are a number of things that actually do seem to level the playing field. Since the internet is post-geographical, you can put your website up from Idaho and still reach the same audience. It really isn't dependent at all on where you are, except for the clarity and bandwidth of your telephone service.
Who do you think are the primary beneficiaries then of this? Is it ideas people? Is it a slightly reassuring picture of people, well, I don't know, like yourself or creative people gaining the reins of power in the way that they could never do before?
I can't see why it won't become completely ubiquitous. I think that what we're seeing now, we're still in a phase where personal computation is a sort of middle class pastime. But I think, given the market forces driving the computer industry, we'll see it spread through the whole society. I mean, it should fairly soon. I think it would evolve into something that would that would be like television in the extent that it penetrates every level of society.
I mean, in a way, I'm slightly surprised to hear you say that, because one of the things that I associate with you is somebody who famously wrote about. Came up with the idea of cyberspace on an old portable Hemingway typewriter, rather than whatever was the state of the art in, well, there wasn't a great deal.
Yes,
It was
but
in that.
people do forget that there was no state of the art in personal computing when I wrote Neuromancer, and that's why I was using a typewriter. Neuromancer and the first Macintosh were released in the same year, and someone told me recently in the same month. That's difficult for young people to imagine, I know. But I didn't know anyone who had a personal computer. There were almost none.
I understood that, though, that in a sense what you were talking about is that the power there was the power of the imagination, not the power of the machine.
When I wrote Neuromancer, there was effectively no internet to extrapolate from. I made it up. The cyberspace I made up isn't being used in Neuromancer in the way that we're using the internet today. In Neuromancer, it's all corporate, and a few cybernetic car thieves are skulking through it, attempting to steal tidbits of information. People aren't using it to exchange recipes with their relatives in West Germany. People aren't using it personally, and in my later work, I've had to deal with what the internet has become.
Right.
So I think that accounts for the difference. And what the internet has become is as much a surprise to me as the collapse of the Soviet Union was. Those are, definitely two things I didn't foresee about the future.
Do you feel that we should fear the power of this technology, or should we embrace it? I mean, are there fears that you feel personally about the power it has to change the way?
Well, I think we should respect the power of technology and try to fear it in a rational way, because the chances are, with any given technology, once it's introduced, it's not going to go away. The only reason it ever goes away is if there turns out to be no market for it. And that's a major part of what I do in my work, is try to envision unintended consequences of new technologies. I don't think that technophobia or technophilia are appropriate responses to our situation. I think the only appropriate response is the most profound ambivalence. I think that's what we owe new technologies. We have to teach ourselves to be absolutely ambivalent about them, and mainly we have to teach ourselves to imagine their inadvertent side effects, because the inadvertent side effects are the side effects that tend to get us.